everybody. Welcome to this next episode of the BC Zoom Room brought to you by the Boston College Carroll School of Management Career Team. I have a good one here today, Steve Tesoro. Steve, a little bit more about his background. Steve is a BC alumni, graduated in 2009 with a finance degree. Steve has worked with over 24 airlines, aerospace companies, financiers, and investors across a variety of engagements. He has particular areas of focus, including new aircraft campaigns, aircraft advisory to support mergers and acquisition transactions, in and out of court debt and lease restructuring, Chapter 11 process management, and capacity purchase agreements. Steve, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thanks so much. I'm doing great, Drew. How are you?
I'm doing well. Out here in Cleveland. Now, could you let our audience know where you are, where you're calling from today?
Sure. So I'm calling in from Seattle, Washington today.
Awesome. And Seattle was one of the big states to first get hit with COVID-19. Could you give us some updates? What does it look like on the ground there?
Yeah, so we were the first place in the country that had a confirmed case, and it's certainly spread quite rapidly. And to see, I had been out of the country for 2 weeks earlier in March, and from the difference between when I left and when I returned to the city were just night and day. It certainly spread much faster in some other places like New York. So the relative lack of density in the city in Seattle has slowed it down a little bit. But yeah, it's the same surreal experience that I think everybody else is having that lives in some of these medium or larger cities. And an important bit of perspective. I was speaking to my parents just over the weekend, and this isn't anything that my parents or our parents, our grandparents, have ever experienced. Even back to those of our grandparents who lived through World War II, there's really been nothing quite like this.
Steve, you're spot on that last point. This is unprecedented times for everybody. And I think it's fair to say that nobody really knows what's going on. And through this uncertainty, you really just have to make decisions fast and then learn from them fast and pivot and adjust and just communicate it that, this is unprecedented times. So that's a very interesting perspective. And I don't think I mentioned Steve is an air fleet restructuring and transactions professional, and he's currently working in the aviation industry with Boeing, which has been deeply impacted by the slowdown in global travel. So Steve, can you tell us a little bit more before we get into your background, just about, current role, current job, current company, kind of the state of that industry?
Sure. So my role at Boeing is a little bit different than in my past experience, where it's very transactions and restructuring focused. I'm in a marketing focused role here at Boeing, which is focused on supporting our airline customers by demonstrating the use of our aircraft products across their existing route networks, as well as supporting the aircraft sales process by demonstrating the advantages of our Boeing products over those products of our competitors, and how those products are able to fit profitably into our customers' networks. So to that extent, now that I'm more focused on the sales side, the business has for sure slowed down as a result of this. In addition, Boeing came into this crisis with a backlog of a large number of undelivered 737 aircraft as a result of the FAA grounding. So it's sort of a compounding of one problem that's affecting both us and our competitor, as well as our suppliers, and another problem that Boeing had been struggling with for close to a year now. So the work on the sales side has for sure slowed down. On our professionals who assist with customer finance and contractual matters have been very busy as a result of this, as airlines are looking for additional sources of financing or looking to potentially restructure existing aircraft orders. But air travel always has a way of bouncing back. So it's slow and it may take a while. But our business is based on the assumption that there is just no substitute for being somewhere in person, and that's proven to be the case, and the industry has proven to be resilient through past downturns.
And that makes perfect sense, and people need to travel. And at some point when these times pass over, planes will fill up again. People will be traveling. So I think a very interesting perspective you mentioned there before we get to the next point of, working for Boeing, it's kind of been a double whammy of you had the issues with the 737s, and that created some groundings and, disruptions to supply chain and just making sure that you guys have everything right. And now you have the grounding of just the whole industry and just travel in general. So it's just, weathering the storm, and your leadership at Boeing and across the industry are just figuring out ways to extract value and make sure that they're able to stay sustainable so that they do catch this travel wave when things return to normal. So I think some very interesting insight. And if anybody has questions for Steve about the airline industry or working in a role that entails that industry, I think he can give you a breadth of audience, or a breadth of experience. So without much more talking too much about that, I would love to shift focus into kind of your background. So I know I mentioned that you were a BC grad of 2009, so really in the heart of the financial crisis. So just would love to get your perspective on what that looked like for jobs and careers for both you and your classmates at the time, and kind of your path in terms of getting into Goldman, and then how you kind of navigate a career after that.
So I had in 2007 and 2008, I had done well and was happy, and that quickly turned out to not be a choice that I ended up being happy with. But when we returned to campus in the fall of 2008, it was right before I think Lehman failed in mid or late September, which was really when things really started to go downhill. And there were signs, all throughout 2008 that something was coming, but it was very challenging for those of us on campus in the fall of 2008. A lot of firms rescinded offers or indefinitely delayed offers. Some firms, like the bank that I worked at, hadn't extended any summer offers before the fall of Lehman. They had decided to wait. And then when the offers finally did come out later in the fall, there were a lot fewer of them than there had been in the past. So it was very stressful, I think, for everybody to see effectively no recruiting on campus as a result of that. Now, things did pick back up in the spring. So a number of individuals that didn't have offers were extended offers from those banks during the spring. And banks indeed went out with additional offers or for additional recruiting. So at that time, there was a tendency to cut pretty drastically. But then when things started to look like they would turn around, there was some additional movement. So I don't think it's out of the ordinary for companies to sort of want to be sitting on their hands at this point in time until we see what the recovery looks like, how much longer this is going to go on, and where exactly the need is going to be. And in my business, there's very little need for individuals in marketing right now, but restructuring need is way up, and every consulting firm is trying to build restructuring muscle at the moment. So there is opportunity. It's just not necessarily where you might want it to be. And there's always the option of going somewhere like I did, going where there is an opportunity, and working hard and trying to pivot when the time is right to something that's more aligned with your interests.
Your network is key. Once you get your foot in the door, you want people to remember who you are. So I don't want to call it a squeaky screw, but, keeping in touch with the campus recruiters or keeping in touch with contacts that you had at the business to understand the state of that business. And I think that really parlays into your last point of, if you understand the state of the business, in your business right now, Boeing, they don't care about marketing. The big focus is restructuring. So if a business is focusing on restructuring, they're going to look at hiring management consulting firms that can help them. So both in your industry, restructuring jobs are key, and management consulting, restructuring, positions may open up. So it might be a different opportunity with the same firm, and it might just switch in the responsibilities that you're doing. But once you have your foot inside, you can pivot and you can, adjust and say, this isn't what I want to do anymore. but I can take this experience into the next role. And I think the last point is patience. Patience is important. And in these times when COVID has kind of disrupted the world and we're inside for most of the day now, social distancing, and we have to learn to slow down, that's so vital. Because like you said, businesses are just looking to see what that environment will be. So you need to be patient because businesses are looking at this and being patient. And once they understand where the opportunity is and where they can attack, then they'll start opening up roles. So that's so with that, I think that gives, some really good insight. Could you give a little bit more about once you got into Goldman? And
yeah, so I worked at the bank for 3 years, and I spent most of that time actually trying to move into one of the areas of the bank that actually supported the airline business. So those that either advise airlines on M&A or other corporate finance transactions, or our group that did aircraft capital markets, so that lent airlines money against aircraft and other collateral. And the airline industry is actually very small, and it's also very niche, which means it's very easy to identify somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about. So I think I had been very well served by having had this, very long-standing interest in the business, of having, been reading industry press very regularly, of talking to people regularly, so that when I was having a conversation with one of these people who serviced airline clients at the bank, I could ask intelligent questions or make an impression that I was somebody who had a genuine demonstrated interest in the space, number one, versus just being not being happy where I was, and number two, who takes considerable time to actually do research and prepare for meetings and be able to ask well-informed questions. So I think doing those two things, having a demonstrated interest and finding ways to demonstrate that interest and finding people to network with and speak to, really helps you leave an impression. People are going to remember, when they speak to somebody who's, who's well informed, and the industry being as small and as tight knit as it is. Once I met a few people, it was very easy to continue to be introduced to, to others, especially after very clearly demonstrated an interest in the field.
very powerful. So very, very powerful. So once you got your foot in the door, you didn't let off the gas, you stepped down a bit harder. And when your success came from not only delivering on your daily goals and daily action items, but it was becoming an expert in the industry that you were interested in.
Yeah, and I think you said something there that's very important. If you're looking to make a move, especially internally to when I was at Goldman, for example, you don't just have to be doing satisfactorily in your current role. You have to be performing pretty well above average. So even if you're sitting somewhere where you're not exactly thrilled and you do have an eye towards moving on to something else, you really can't let up the focus on what's in front of you and focus on excelling at the task at hand.
Powerful. So powerful. I hope that if you heard that, if you didn't hear that, you need to play that back again. It's once you get in, even if it's a job that you don't want to take, especially in this climate, guys, if we're taking jobs out there or we're looking at career paths that are outside the norm, you get that first opportunity, but that first opportunity just gives you one skill. And in your career, you want to develop a toolbox of skills. So, you got one tool from that first experience or a few tools, and now you want to develop more. So it's saying, what can I learn from this? And then how can I pivot and do something else that I really want to start doing? So that's so valuable and important. So Steve, kind of just the last real big question I have for you, just any takeaways. So if a student is listening to this today and they say, what can I take actionably away from this conversation with Steve? Do you have any just three kind of big takeaways that you can give the students? And I know we've hit on a couple already, but just to reiterate the importance of this.
First and foremost in this environment, and I'm, coming to you with the perspective from the airline business, where this is far worse than anything anybody could have imagined, and it's still getting worse. We haven't hit bottom yet. You may very well may have to be looking in areas for employment that are not exactly what you wanted. But Drew, you mentioned, and I agree, it's important to make sure that you take something out of every experience that you have. Focus on doing well where you are, and still with an eye towards perhaps moving to where it is that you want to be. I'd say networking is very important. What helped me get into Seabury, which was the firm that I worked at for 7 years after Goldman, was networking. I joined our industry association. I went to the industry association's holiday party. I had a colleague with me who introduced me to a number of other individuals that eventually led to the job that I had at Seabury. So focusing on ways to do that, even if it's not possible to do in person, which leads me to the third point, which is a demonstrated interest. If you have a quirky interest, airlines is, a quirky interest, is the industry is very niche. That's something that people are going to remember, and that's going to help you stand out. So don't, shy away from interests like that, potentially hard to turn into a career, right? The airline industry is very difficult to get into. And part of the reason I think I ended up where I did at Goldman was I didn't know how to get into it. But keeping that interest alive and reading and researching and staying current and finding people to talk to will serve you very well.
All great actionable tips. I really appreciate it, Steve. And before we get out of here, since you are an Eagle alumni like myself, and the passion really flows through our veins, you got to answer one of our once an Eagle, always an Eagle. So I think a good question for you would be, what's your favorite late night snack? Can you tell me that?
They still have mozzarella sticks. They still make it.
They still make the mozzarella sticks. I don't know if they're the same as when you were there, but they are delicious.
Yeah, that'd be it.
That'd be it. So late night, we'll call it like a Friday or a Saturday. You get lowers about 1:30. I think it closes at 2. That's the thing you're ordering, a Moz stick.
Yeah, that's
love it. That's awesome. Good. Well, guys, again, this was Steven Tesoro with Boeing. He's now a regional director, graduated from BC in 2009. Steve, is there a good way that a student, if they're interested in this conversation, want to find out more from you, a good way they can reach out?
Sure. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a message, and happy to chat with anybody.
Good. So there you heard it here live. We'll have Steve's LinkedIn bio in our show notes, and then we really enjoyed the conversation, Steve. Thank you so much, guys. If you just want to stay up to date with anything coming from the Fulton 315 coaching staff, you can follow us at Fulton_315. That's again, Fulton_315. Steve, really appreciate it, brother.
Take care. Thanks so much, Drew.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.